God declares that this whole group, the Meshech, that's the sixth son of Japheth. Now, according to Herodotus, they were dwelling in Phrygia and Anatolia, that's modern Turkey. But Herodotus also says some of them were above the Black Sea. See, we're going upward. See, they weren't content to stay down there near where they settled. They were always kind of pushing out like America, out in the frontier. And where they pushed is up into that beautiful, the steppes, the plains. And they were horsemen, and they loved to ride their horses up there, and there are too many mountains and valleys in Turkey. So they went up there toward Russia. And then Tubal, by the way, we have a Tubalsk and a Tubal River. And by the way, that's all in Russia today, which is interesting. Persia, that's no trouble. Iran was called Persia till 1935. Kush, that's the modern black African peoples between the second and third cataract. That's clearly Sudan and Ethiopia. Put, as I said, is modern Libya. They used to be called the Puttites, but it would include the Algerians, the Tunisians, the Moroccans, the Mauritanians, North Africa. Gomer is challenging. It could be Turkey. It also is a term for Germany and Austria, and I've thought about that because the more you look at the birth rates, modern Western Europe is declining. That zero population growth thing is working. They do have zero population. In fact, they're going the wrong way. And the immigrants are coming. And most of them are Muslims. And it's interesting that Western Europe, if the Lord tarries, we won't even have a question about this. Gomer is Germany, because they're all becoming Muslim through conversion and population growth. Beth Togarmah is Armenia. That's the Turkic-speaking peoples of Central Asia. I mean, those are the stands, Kazakh and all those other stands. Sheba and Dedan are the grandsons of Abraham in Genesis 25:2 by his third wife, Keturah. Remember? He was a pretty active fella. He raised a lot of Arabic peoples, and Sheba and Dedan would be, they're not from Ishmael, they're a separate line. They may be the classic Arabic dwellers. They're seen as living out in what we would call the Saudi Arabia, that whole area that is so much unhappy about Israel. Tarshish was the grandson of Japheth. He's the second son of Javan. He's the father of Greece, and how Greece fits into this. Again, it's very much wondering whether it's where the people first migrated or where they went. But basically, God says in Ezekiel 38:5, trust him. He declares the destruction of this entire Russian, Iranian, Syrian, Lebanese, whatever it is, Islamic military force that comes like a storm against Israel. And look what it says in verse 5. Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya are with them. Verse 18, it will come to pass at the same time when God comes against the land of Israel, says the Lord my God, that my fury will show in my face. My jealousy, verse 19, the fire of my wrath, I have spoken, surely in that day there will be a great earthquake in the land of Israel. Verse 20, so the fish of the sea, the birds of heaven, the beasts of the field, all creeping things on the earth, all men who are on the face of the earth shall shake at my presence. And on he goes. And basically, verse 22 says, I bring him to judgment with pestilence, bloodshed. I'll rain down on him and his troops. On many people who are with him, flooding rain, great hailstones, fire, and brimstone. Basically, what the Lord is saying there is, I'm watching over my people. I'm going to protect them. And it's in the future, because those people never have marched against Israel. Well, basically, the details of Ezekiel 39 are, if you look at verses 9 and 10, whatever this event is, the weaponry from it is burned for 7 years. Now, it's interesting, and who am I to dispute with him, but my very dear friend who wrote my favorite study Bible, and who I worked for, says this is Revelation 20. This is the millennium. I think, wow, that's interesting. What are they burning weapons for 7 years when they don't even have weapons, when they've beaten their swords into plowshares? But, he has great reasons for it. But whatever it is, for 7 years they're burning it. What's interesting, that's the usable life of atomic weaponry, the half-life and everything. You can only store those things so long. That's why America, we spend so many billions. You always have to take those little nuclear warheads off and redo them. They aren't good they don't have a long shelf life. And it's interesting that atomic material is very usable. What's also interesting is look at verses 11 through 16. I'm not going to take a long time on it because we don't have more than 1 minute and 8 seconds. But basically, I'll say this, that they are doing what we would call cleanup after a disaster that has radioactive and chemical warfare implications because they're taking them downwind. If you read 11 to 16, the area described is downwind east of the Dead Sea. It sounds like a quarantine, like a hazardous cleanup, like a radioactive contamination procedure. So, back to the beginning. I mean, this could be before the tribulation, this could be in the tribulation, this could be at the end of the millennium. Doesn't matter, it's going to happen. See, that's what we don't fight and dispute. But what Jesus said is, this is all going to happen. What are you asking God to do? Jesus says, I collect your prayers. We talked about that this morning. You know what we should do? We should pray. Jesus says, I multiply. Mark 12, you ought to read it. Jesus measures our gifts not by how much we give, but by how much it costs us. Jesus says, I will multiply your sacrificial gifts. I will make them 100-fold. That's 10,000% give. Jesus says, I count the souls you lead to me. I mean, Keith can't even talk about evangelism without tearing up. When's the last time you gave a verbal witness of Jesus Christ to someone? You say, well, we have missionaries and evangelists for that. When's the last time we did it? Jesus said all believers are supposed to go into all the world, and we're all supposed to share. And if Keith's over in England, he's not going to get your neighbors in Portage. You understand what I mean? We're all supposed to be doing this. And Jesus says, I count. In fact, Daniel 12:3 says, the more people you lead the Lord, the more you'll shine forever. And Paul said, the only thing I'm looking forward to taking to heaven with me are the people I lead to Christ. So we should win people. We should try. We should give out a tract. We should pray. Jesus said, I remember humble service that nobody knows about, that is the least and the most faceless where no one recognition. Serve. And Jesus said, I love believers that do outreach. Go. So prophecy should encourage us to love, follow, and serve God now. See, that's the effect. The net effect that prophecy had on the early church was they weren't all selling everything sitting on mountaintops and counting down. They were trying to lead every person they could meet and point them to Christ. They understood.